In this video, we'll show how to configure a SeaTag mod. The first step is that before you connect the mod to the docking station here, you want to remove the O-ring here, which will make it easier to insert it and prevent the very fragile pins that you see in here from getting smashed accidentally due to misalignment. So Christian, if you would please remove the O-ring. So we have a little O-ring remover tool. You just kind of have to see what works best for you. Do not use a metal screwdriver or anything, because you can very well hurt the hurt the O-ring groove there, scar it. All right, and now connect it to the docking station. Right, so the pins have to be perfectly aligned, and you put it together. Doesn't take much force. Oh, yeah, so he got it put together now. And the next thing, we start the SeaDock software. Here it actually already started itself automatically. We had connected it, already launched it. And that now establishes the connection to the tag. And with that, we can now go through the steps of tag configuration. Here are some of the parameters.
All right, let's go through the configuration of your SeaTag here in screen capture mode. So that's done in the SeaDock utility that you can find on the Desert Star website under software. Then go to communication and select the serial port that you are hooked up to, that your dongle is hooked up to. I only have the choice of closed or COM3. COM3 is really my only one. It's called out as USB serial port, so you select one that's called USB serial port. Now a connection process is starting. I'll also call up the show raw communication window. Let me pull that up here. Here we can start to see it. And what you'll see here now happening is this is communication from SeaDock to the tag, and these are the replies of the tags. So we now have connected to the tag, as you can see down here. So now essentially you have to enter all your data field for the configuration that you want to do. I'm not going to explain all the individual fields in great detail. I just give you a big overview, because in the SeaTag-MOD manual there is a detailed description of all the fields. So please review that, but I'll give you the big picture of what needs to be done. First of all, here's basic data about this. Here's software version 3.12 on the tag. Make sure you have the latest version. Desert Star always ships the latest before we ship a tag to you, but maybe you haven't used it for a while. Notice this tag currently has 29,200 packets on them. Well, you certainly want to erase the log. Here we'll do that, and this will take a little bit of time. You'll see an update here. And the reason why we do that is because we want to have a fresh memory, so that no data is being sent via the very limited Argos link that isn't needed, that is from before the deployment of the fish. Now maybe you want to have some that's a little bit from before the deployment of the fish, so you get the actual tagging of the fish on there. But you certainly don't want to have 29,000 packets that are just clogging up your pipeline. It's still formatting. It says this takes approximately 1 minute. While this is happening, let me go through some other things. You want to select the battery type that's used on it, what we also call the release section here. ST-MRPS is the most common one. That's important for getting the right battery voltage, overall voltage management, power management threshold settings. Meanwhile, we can see that our tag was successfully erased, and we should see there's now 0 packets in here. Then one of the very big parameters is the fundamental sensor sampling interval. Here I should say that geoposition information is always automatically sampled once every 4 minutes, no matter your settings that you use. But if you want to get the sensor scans in particular at a faster rate, you know, say the consecutive depth readings, temperature readings, acceleration readings, and so on, you can set that down. As you do that, notice that the available memory endurance declines. I'm going to go from, I had 4 minutes and we had 63 years here of memory endurance. I think there's some other things set here. Let me just check that. Seems not quite enough. Yeah, let me just uncheck some of these things here. We'll get back to them here in a moment. Yeah, that kind of tripped me up a bit. So at 4 minutes, you had 441 years worth of recording. Of course, a ridiculously long amount. You could set this to 2 seconds. If you record a full sensor scan every 2 seconds, you still have 3 years. It's still a long time. So this does have an impact though on power consumption, and there's an app note on power consumption and how long your battery will last if the fish is in darkness and doesn't get any sunlight. Of course, if it's in sunlight, remember the tag is always powered by sunlight stored in the capacitor as well. It's battery, which is primarily for extended periods of darkness. Yes, moving on to the next tab here. On this tab, you have to define all your Argos decimal IDs and hexadecimal IDs for your whole consignment of tags. And you only fill out the first 2 fields. All the other ones are filled out when you're actually configuring a tag. Lets you know when a mission starts and ends, and how many transmit days, and importantly, what tag serial number is associated with a decimal ID. So that's good information to have. Next screen, mission settings. Mostly, if you are doing a pop-up tag, you would set PSAT with real-time tracking. Again, you can look up the other modes. Here are some release conditions, some that are always set, so they're just sort of grayed out. You don't have a choice. At the defined mission end time, for example, there will always be a release. CDR, constant depth release. What that is used for, let me set that, for example, to 10 days. Field here is turning green, meaning just some sort of a reasonable setting, but you can go with red fields. It's just helping you stay on an even path here. Constant depth release. Traditionally, it's meant for, say, when a fish dies and it's now on the seafloor. Or at the surface. Now, of course, when a fish dies, then it's probably gonna very soon the tag is just gonna pop up anyway as the fish decays and the tag pulls out. But where it's important is in the very common event of tag shedding. All tags will shed, whether that's before or after your programmed end of deployment. But they will shed. And so before a tag has released, either by the programmed release date or otherwise by CDR, before that happens, it will only transmit priority packets, nothing else. So the other packets, sensor packets, you will only get after a release trigger. And so you should define CDR for something. CDR if there's no significant depth change for a certain number of days. Next category is high resolution acceleration, and you really want to look up the app note on that. One thing to say about HRA is that it takes accelerometer readings 32 times as fast as whatever your sample rate is. So if your sample rate is 32 seconds on the first tab here, if that was 32 seconds, then you're going to get acceleration once a second. If you're selecting once a second here, then you're really going to get 32 per second, 32 acceleration readings that are going to be done. Why is that? That's because the accelerometer is designed for fast operation, and it does have an internal buffer that can store 32 X, Y, and Z measurements. So that's how that works. Again, look up HIA, look up some of the studies by other scientists who have used this feature on SeaTag-MOD in particular. Next, we are now coming to the programmed start and end time for your deployment. So no data is acquired until the start date is reached. Today we have the 2nd of March, and let's say sometime next week we are going out to sea, but the earliest would be the 16th of March. So that we are tagging, so I can already program that in, but be aware before the 16th of March nothing will be acquired. And then maybe I'm going for a 1-year mission, so I'm going to March 16th 2023. All right, 365 days. You can also specify the exact pop-up time in hours, minutes, seconds. That is used by scientists who plan to be on site when a tag pops up, probably for a species that's not going to move a whole lot. And the tag pops to the surface, you get Argos transmission, a radio direction finder lets you find the tag, and then of course you have a gold mine of data, all the full data. And in particular, well, there's several scientists, including Rick Gertz, have done that and gotten very large and beautiful data sets on sable fish out at sea in the Pacific, on sturgeon in the Pacific Ocean near San Francisco, on trout in the Great Lakes. So it can work on a surprising number of species. Very important now, data transmission, the Argos ID code. Notice this is always the hexadecimal mode, which is used for communication between the tag and the satellite, rather than the also supplied, CLS supplied decimal number, 50BA 4BE. Let's look at that. Right, that is tag 109739, which is what you'd use on the website and in Sea-Watch and so on. Very important to get that right, and once you've configured everything, you really want to do put the tag out in the sun for a day, let it transmit, have it floating in a bucket full of water, a white bucket or clear bucket or bin full of water, or jar, if you will, to get some of your data and make sure everything checks out just fine. Next thing here, priority packets versus other packets. The idea with these tags is that they send certain data first, that's a priority data, and then thereafter they switch to sending all data, which is priority and others. What is priority? Daily summaries that show what happened in a given day, depth histogram, and G-force statistics, which is for the HRA stuff. Again, have to refer to that app note there. The other packets are really right now just the sensor scan packet. What is important to notice is that as you click these things, let me go to the most basic form. I'm only going to transmit the daily summary, right? The total packet load, a transmission load is 1 Argos packet per day. Doesn't mean only 1 transmission per day. The tag is going to transmit as much as it can, but only 1 packet is collected per day, whereas you might receive on a day, typical day, between 20 and 100 packets from the Argos system. So this is a very light load, and before long it'll loop around and transmit the same thing over and over again. If I now go to sensor packets, see, it goes to 361. It added 360 per day, and that's because we are at a sample rate of once every 4 minutes, and there's 364-minute sample rates in a day. Now, what's the impact of that? Well, it collects 360 per day, but you only gonna receive 20 to 100 per day, and there can be duplicates in there, right? TAG doesn't know which packets have been received by the satellite. And so, you will not, for a year at sea, there's no way you will get all the packets because you can only, like the biggest data sets we've seen is around 6,000 packets received. Eventually the tag will foul up and not transmit much anymore. 6,000 at the most, 2,000 is pretty typical, maybe 1 to 2,000. But then there'll also be shorter data sets. Here you can see the importance of doing priority transmission, and then the rest of it, so you're going to get a full, sensor scans and other non-priority packets where you can't expect to get anywhere near all of them. You get snippets here and there. Priority transmission timing. This one right now is set up to transmit priority packets after pop-up, that is CDR or the release date reached, all priority data 5 times and for at least 3 days. That's a good setup. Maybe you want to go 5 or 7 loops to give you a good number, a good percentage of your priority packets, and then move on to transmitting everything else. And the 3 days is in case there was a day of transmission, but somehow the transmission couldn't reach the satellite. Maybe some debris was on the antenna or something like that. So you want to always transmit for a certain minimum number of days. Real-time transmission transmit the selected packets, most typically. Very rare that you say you only want the Argos position. Some more stuff, transmitter settings, transmit conditions, generally just leave them blank. Read up in the manual if you're interested. Transmit timing, generally recommend that you're going to have the tag transmit for 10 years, 3,650 days. No tags ever transmitted 10 years, but some have transmitted 3 years. And so the idea here is that they are allowed to transmit as long as they can. You can cut that down. We initially did that to allow you to limit your Argos budget, but CLS lets you, discontinue packet delivery after 30 days for a given tag anyway. So might as well leave it transmitting. And if you find the data is useful for you, have it keep going and get more data. Transmission repeat period 45 days must be per your Argos agreement. It's typically 45 days. And this field here defines the transmit strength, and 300 milliamp is a good number there. The last tab we have is the depth histogram. It can be referenced to local time or UTC time. Local time is based on light observations, and for example, this setting here, start time 6 hours, 0 minutes, 0 seconds. The duration of 12 hours gives you roughly a day and a night histogram, or you can do it UTC reference, whatever your choice is. With this all being done, you're now ready to configure your tag. And I'm going to do write settings. It points out some things that it wants you to review just to make sure you're happy with it. Like, do you really want the mission to start on 3/16/2022? Maybe you selected the wrong year. Yeah, too many days can cause high ultimate transmit charges, but we already said that's not really a concern. Hit yes, and now you see the download to the tag. And now there's a verification phase. Everything is sent back again, so you can look at it. And here we go. Notice also offset of the clock is 0 minutes 3 seconds. That should always be a few seconds. That means that the tag has now accepted the time it is on your PC. Now, it's very important that the time on your PC is correct. Otherwise, geoposition estimates will be off and all your timestamps will be off. Normally, your PC will automatically connect to a time server and everything will be fine. But let's say you are on a ship. Verify the time, and what you need to do is you need to make sure that the time on your PC is the correct time for the time zone that you currently have your PC set to, if it's right now it's 6:47 p.m. California time, and if my clock says 6:47 p.m. California time, I'm okay. You don't have to be in the time zone that your computer is set for. You just have to make sure that the time that is displayed is in fact the time that it is in the current time zone, in the selected time zone. But remember, then all tag timing is on UTC time, but the conversion is automatically done by CDoc. And that completes the configuration of your tag.
Okay, now that our tag configuration is done, it's time to connect the release and power section to the SeaTag, and of course disconnect it from the dock. So Christian, if you can please disconnect the SeaTag from the dock. Here we go. And remember, you have to put the O-ring back on. And there should always be a thin film of O-ring grease on it. See, it snapped right in. Not much at all. Probably would have been better to put it on before putting the O-ring in. And now here comes the tricky part. You have to, this is the release and power section, so it has the battery in it and the release mechanism. You have to align it just right, and then due to the O-ring, it takes quite a bit of force to put it together. If you get it wrong, if you twist it or something, then you will bend off the pins in the ST-MRPS release and power section. So you have to be very careful about that. So Christian is taking his time to make sure everything is aligned just right. Okay. And it snapped in. And you can see there's only a very small gap there. So this one worked fine. So in the next step, there's 3 little holes in there, and you have to put an Allen screw into each one of these. So now that the battery and power section is attached again, you have to secure it with 3 small Allen screws. And Christian, if you would please show that. And they go into the 3 holes. See, one you see here right now. You just put them in gently until they come to a stop, and then you do it with the 2 other screws. Now, as Christian is doing this, when I look here at the end of the tag, this is the burn chamber for the release section, and you would arm that. There's a chip that's already in there. We call it a chip, a green printed circuit board with an igniter chip. And then you put powder into it. You fill it up with this powder that you mix, and then ultimately you thread on this. And I guess we can show how this threads on. The whole arming process is described in a separate video, so we won't be going through that here. Just making sure everything is nice and tight. Again, no need to over tighten it. It is a plastic tag, so you don't want to strip any threads or do any damage there. Okay. And again, remember there would have to be the powder charge in there first, but here we're just showing how this works. Okay. And that's it. Other than the attachment hardware here, the tag is ready to go. And based on your settings that we went over, it will, perform its mission and acquire the data that you need and so on. Thank you very much.